is that, you see, these Navy warfare and other experimental testing, whether they're using the upper atmosphere, whether they're using the oceans or the land areas of the United States, all of a sudden we have become the guinea pigs for, in other words, laboratory rat experiments. And our atmosphere is being used for the Air Force is doing lightning experiments. The Air Force is doing weather modification experiments. So all of these things ongoing, and we have the documentation, you see, leads us to believe that we are being experimented upon for what they call a force multiplier for war. So they have to perfect it, and they have to do all these things, but it's affecting our agriculture when you modify the weather. It's affecting agriculture and crop production when you use our atmosphere as a physics laboratory experiment place without our consent. And the public is not being warned, and they're not being told that these things are going on.
A lot of us see the planes in the air dispersing chemicals into the atmosphere. I've seen it. Friends of mine have seen it. Associates of mine have seen it. The public has seen it. We just don't know what to do about it, really.
Well, there's three things that one has to know, and that is that the minute that you put up those persistent jet contrails, according to NASA, and you have them expanding and turning into man-made clouds and different white haze and different types of cirrus formations, the first thing that NASA says is that you're modifying the weather. The second thing they say is it's exacerbating global warming, and it's having negative impacts on natural resources. And they talk about water vapor because the combustion of a jet engine puts up water vapor. Water vapor is a greenhouse gas. And besides the jet fuel emissions and, in other words, these man-made clouds, they reduce the amount of solar power that a solar power panel can produce when the sky is covered with these. They reduce the amount of sunlight hitting the earth, so you have more molds, mildews, funguses, and viruses that impact agriculture, that impact, in other words, your solar panels. And one of the things that is well known is the direct sunlight is a disinfectant, and it acts to stop flu epidemics, flu viruses, flu pandemics, because they can't survive when they're hit by direct sunlight. And that's why you have reduced colds and things like that in the summertime when you have more direct sunlight reaching the earth. So what happens is it's an educational process to go and get the documents from NASA, which I've compiled for everyone on my website, and to begin to talk about, not about, well, you know, what can we do? It's talking about educating our elected officials because they don't see these NASA studies. And we, the public, have to become lobbyists. And I don't mean lobbyists in a hysterical way. I mean using the documents and actually going to their staff and educating them, going to our elected officials at every level of government, and becoming a lobbyist, just like a corporation pays a lobbyist to promote their side of the story. We have to do the same, and we have to say that there's huge environmental impacts. And I did talk about the jets when I was a keynote speaker at the United Nations. I did talk about the impacts of this man-made cloud cover, and NASA calls it man-made cloud cover, on agriculture and how it changes our climate, and that this impacts microclimates needed for crop production in the United States. So there is a direct link here. We've got the Stanford University studies. We've got NASA studies. We've got other university studies, all online, that tell us that these are having negative impacts. But it's up to us, the people, to lobby, because the environmental groups don't want to talk about this.
Why?
Most of them. And that,
Why?
So being that they don't want to discuss the subject, it is becoming up to us to become the lobbying educational arm of in other words, some of these different agencies, so that we get the word out and get our elected officials to take action.
What is NOAA's role in all this?
NOAA's role, NASA and NOAA are kind of bought into the military. They're kind of all working together.
Yes, indeed.
And what happens is that NOAA with the National Weather Service doesn't want to tell you that the cloud cover that you're seeing or experiencing is not from a weather front. It's from, in other words, that it's from these man-made clouds that are produced by the jets. So what they do, I talked to the Eureka National Weather Service some time back and was kind of having them look when I was on the telephone with them at these plumes that were expanding over us. And they could see the plumes with their, in other words, their satellite images, and they could look right at this big plume I was talking about that was expanding. So I asked them, I said, well, pretty soon, I said, you're going to put on the Weather Service news that this is cloud cover coming in from some front. I said, but it's being produced by the jets. And they said, well, we consider it all the same thing. So what happens here is that
it's
NOAA
insanity
and NASA, that they are reporting these man-made events as being normal and natural. And that's where we have to call them on it and say, no, this isn't a front coming in. This is when the jets produce the clouds over us.
How does what's happening in our atmosphere as well as our oceans impact, let's say, the bees? What's happening with the bees?
Well, bees navigate by ultraviolet radiation. And when you interfere with the amount of sunlight coming down and you interfere with ultraviolet radiation, then you could have a navigation problem with the bees getting from hive to a source of pollen and then back to the hive. So there is an implication with that, but I think there's a much broader implication with some of the herbicides and pesticides and insecticides that are being used and the GM foods.
Let's go right to that because that's huge.
Yeah, it is huge.
It's very disturbing that our food supply is being molecularly altered, and most people don't know that they're eating food that isn't food anymore as we know it.
Well, it's being changed because a group of chemical companies want to have a monopoly on all seeds, and they want to have a monopoly on, in other words, where you get your food. And they want to have, and by genetically altering your food in some way, they program it so that it will only be activated by their fertilizers, by their chemicals. The seeds in some cases are considered pesticides. They're not considered a seed. They're actually labeled as a pesticide.
Are you serious? I mean, I've never heard this.
I'm serious. Yeah.
How can we confirm that?
I've got the I've got the studies on my website under the agricultural section.
We're going to go and look.
And there's a honeybee section as well. So you can go to either the honeybee section or the agriculture section. I would probably go to the honeybee section. It's quicker.
Let's continue to talk about the genetically modified seeds. They're labeled a pesticide, but what do they do?
What do they do? Well, what they do is they will kill, they're labeled a pesticide because they will kill some bacteria or some pest in the ground. And so, in other words, they're like taking a pill. You take a antibiotic or something. It's the same thing. It's like they have this impact. And anyone that wants the specific information, it's in a study, and it's on an EPA document as well.
And don't we love the EPA?
We do sometimes, and we don't sometimes.
Yeah, I agree.
See, the EPA has become co-opted by having a lot of appointees that are industry appointees. So you have people that promote, like the Agricultural Secretary Vilsack is a promoter of GM foods. So when he was appointed by Obama didn't appoint someone who might have been against GM foods. He appointed a promoter of GM foods. So we're in danger from that appointment. The EPA suffers similar problems due to appointees who, one, may not be allowed to speak out about certain things, or two, in other words, directly promote policies that are against us. And Obama, in a recess appointment, he promoted a man by the